Today, I'm going to talk about why I use e-collars during training. There's two main reasons why I use an e-collar when I train dogs. One, it works really well for the dog. Two, it works really well for the owner. Let me explain. So, when I say it works really well for the dog, see, when you train a dog, there's two things you have to have if you want to do balanced dog training, or for that matter, any sort of effective dog training. You have to be able to tell the dog what the dog's doing right, and you have to be able to communicate with the dog what the dog is doing wrong. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be mean or anything about it, but you just have to be able to let the dog know, hey, that's not the right thing, or, yeah, this is really the right thing, keep doing that. And so traditionally, you could use something like food or your voice or a toy or something and praise the dog and tell the dog, yeah, this is what you're doing right. Or you could use something like a leash or a tap with your hand or something like that, or just a stern note to tell your dog, this is what you're doing wrong. But with a lot of dogs, instead of just a no or something like that, you either have to use leash pressure or a leash correction or something like that, because otherwise the dog's like, well, okay, there's not really a consequence, or the dog might be like, I don't feel like doing it or whatever. But you have to have both sides. So the great thing about e-collars is because you don't have to have a leash attached, because it's a remote collar and so you have the remote and your dog's wearing the collar, it allows you and your dog to both have more freedom way sooner than if you were just using a leash. Now, I still start with a leash, and I don't put an e-collar on for a few days even after I start training, because the e-collar has no inherent meaning to the dog. It's not good or bad, or the sensation from an e-collar, the muscle stimulus, is just a feeling. Whereas the leash, especially if you're using a prong collar, it has meaning. The dog kind of knows what a bite means and what it feels like, and the dog goes, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I start the dog off with the leash, and then I layer over it with the e-collar. And so basically, I'm able to use the e-collar like a leash, except I don't have to have the leash attached. So for your dog, this means that your dog can have way more freedom way sooner than if you were just using a leash. And it also allows you to communicate faster with the dog, because if you're across a room and you see the dog start to get off place or stand up if you told him downstairs, something like that, you can communicate instantly with him by hitting the button, and you don't have to say no and walk across the room and then grab the leash and do all that. So it also works better just because it's faster and it's more efficient. Now, the other great thing about the e-collar is that if you have a fearful dog, the e-collar is really good for that. And the reason is because the e-collar allows you to share pressure in the form of a muscle stimulus without sharing any force or any directional force. Because if you have to use a leash to share pressure with your dog, there's going to be some physical force behind it. But if you can share pressure and communicate with your dog using the e-collar, then there's no force, there's no directional pull. And so if you have a fearful dog that you're trying to be really gentle with, the e-collar is a really great way of doing that, because you can share pressure without sharing force. Now, that being said, the second part of this is I use e-collars because they really help dog owners. And the thing about it is this: to really learn to use a leash effectively takes some work. Most people can learn it, but it's not just instantly like they pick the leash up and they're good at it. They actually have to work at it and, practice pressure and release and using the leash in different directions and really being able to communicate well with the leash. And a lot of people find that difficult. But today, especially with all the phones and computers and things around, most people are going to pick up how to use an e-collar much faster, because there's a dial on it and there's buttons. And so with the e-collar, you just have the remote and you have to make sure you're at the right level, and then you just have to make sure you push and release the buttons at the right time. And so I'm not saying there's no skill involved in it, because there is, but it's just way easier for most people to learn than using a leash. So one of the big reasons, like I said, why I use an e-collar is because it actually makes the dog owners have a far easier time being successful than if they weren't using it. So those are the main two reasons why I use it, because it's really great for dogs and it's also really great for dog owners. And then of course the other thing is, having an e-collar really can give you a lot of peace of mind, because if you go, say to a dog-friendly beach, or you have a lot of property where your dog can run or something like that, even if, say a rabbit runs by or something, and, maybe 99% of the time your dog responds to you just with your voice. But if there's one time where your dog doesn't, you know that you can push the button on the e-collar and share the muscle stimulus pressure with your dog again, and you know that your dog will instantly turn around and come back to you if he's been trained right and if you used it right. So it's also just really great for that. Even if you have a really solidly trained dog and everything's going well, it's still just like an extra insurance policy, even if your dog's like a quarter mile away, where you can tell your dog to come. And, if he gets sidetracked or something, you can still communicate with him and share pressure with him. So anyway, that's how I use, or that's why I use e-collars. I mainly use them as communication devices and not so much for correcting. Obviously, during the later stages of dog training, we will use the e-collar if we have to correct the dog, but it's mainly just a way we normally use very low levels just to communicate with the dog and to share pressure with them and help the dog understand what we want in a clear way, which makes the training go faster for the dog and it makes it easier for the owner. And so they just work really well. So anyway, that's why I use them. Thanks for watching. I'm Matt Hendricks with Follow the Leader Dog Training.